Hey everyone, Mike here with the Sysadmin Guru, and today I wanted to take a few minutes and show you guys the Raspberry Pi 3. Now I know you're probably saying, Mike, you're late to the game, these things have been out forever. Yes, I'm aware. But what I wanted to show you is how we can use the Raspberry Pi 3s kind of in relation to systems administration. So you may be thinking also, well, Raspberry Pi it's a hobbyist thing. We can build robots and stuff, but there's a lot of other things you can do with it. So the great thing about the Raspberry Pi is it's really just a tiny computer running a Linux distribution. You can even run Windows Internet of Things on it. So pretty much anything we can do, for the most part, with Linux or Windows Internet of Things, we're able to do with a Raspberry Pi. And in the very small size we have here, you can see that it's pretty sweet in what we can maybe do with it, because we can pretty much put this thing anywhere we want, being that it's literally the size of a credit card. Now this one is the Raspberry Pi 3. You can also get the Raspberry Pi Zero, which doesn't have these USB and network ports. So if you can imagine just this card minus those ports, that's basically your Raspberry Pi Zero. It has wireless and Bluetooth built into it, which is the reason I like this model so much. You don't have to rely on a third-party wireless adapter or Bluetooth adapter. It is built right into this $35 card. Now let me show you what you actually need to really kind of get up and running with a Raspberry Pi. So this is what you need here to really get started with the Raspberry Pi. Now for the $35, this is what you get. You get a Raspberry Pi 3, and that's it. Let me even take this memory card out so you don't get confused about receiving that with it. What you get is you get the Raspberry Pi 3, which is exactly this. It comes with 4 USB ports, a network port, a wireless adapter built in, a Bluetooth adapter built in. You also get an HDMI out, you get an audio out, and then here's your power adapter right here, okay? What you also get is you get a input-output system here. This is where you can actually attach things like servos and other different types of monitoring pieces. And this gets back into what I was talking about as a systems administrator, where you can use these Raspberry Pis for certain things. We can set up a Raspberry Pi to actually monitor different attributes into our data center. So if we want to monitor temperature, or we want to monitor moisture or humidity, that kind of stuff, we can attach adapters to this, and those can actually monitor. And if we have it on the network, it can then shoot us emails when certain attributes are met. So if the temperature gets too high in our data center, this can email us. The other great thing about these is for the fact that it's running a full Linux distribution on it, to a degree, you can do a lot of stuff with it. So for example, I have a client right now who I'm writing a custom web application for. And one of the ideas is actually to take this device and use it as the web server. They don't need a whole lot of storage space, so a micro SD card is perfect. But I could literally run Apache and whatever web services I want right here on this. So as long as this is plugged in to power and a network, they'd be able to access their web app from this tiny little device. The other great use that I have for one right now is I actually have a client who I'm redesigning a network for. And that client, one of the things they need is a DHCP server. So what are my options? I can either stand up a DHCP server. Okay, I want to separate networks. So I can't use a typical home router because that's not going to work very well, because they can only typically do one DHCP network. So what am I going to do? Well, instead of buying a $1,800 Cisco switch, I can buy me a $500 Netgear switch that will do multiple VLANs but does not do DHCP. And then I can add this $35 device into their network as a DHCP server. So enough with that. Let me continue on with some of the other things you need. This is what you get for the $35. But you don't get the SD card that you need to put an operating system on this. So the next thing that you need is you need a micro SD card. And most of these are not too expensive. This one actually is a micro SD card that comes with the adapter to use into a regular SD slot. Again, these are not too bad or too expensive. The next thing you need is a USB power cable. Now, there are certain power cables that are recommended for the Raspberry Pi. I typically use pretty much any one that I have available, and I have a lot of these micro USBs available. So I typically use this, and what you'll see me do here shortly is literally plug this right into my laptop to power it. Now, that is not recommended by the Raspberry Pi Foundation. They do not recommend that you power the Raspberry Pi from a laptop or computer, especially if you're going to be adding additional peripherals to it. Now, the next thing I'm going to walk you through is actually setting this up. And to do that, we are going to need a network cable. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple, nothing special about this network cable. I had it laying around in the back. I didn't actually have to purchase it. Cool. So now that we've taken a look at the different pieces of a Raspberry Pi, what I'm going to show you here next is actually how to set the Raspberry Pi up without needing an external keyboard, mouse, or monitor. And we're going to use the most current version of the Raspbian image. Now that you know all the pieces to the Raspberry Pi, let me go ahead and actually show you how we're going to burn an image. Yes, I did say burn, it's not really burning, but I'm going to show you how we're going to burn an image to our micro SD card here. The first thing that we need to do is we need to have a computer that is able to read a SD card. So what we're going to simply do is put the micro SD card, and this is a 32 gig SD card, into our micro SD card slot. Now this is a brand new kind of formatted, there's no partitions or anything on this. So we're going to just do that, and we're going to stick it right into our SD slot here. And our computer should recognize it immediately, which it just has. And I can see that it's unallocated. So now let me take you through the steps of actually adding an image to the SD card. So now that I have my SD card plugged into my laptop, it's actually showing up here in the lower left, as you can see, as the D drive. There are no currently partitions on this, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to flash our Raspbian image to this card. So you can see here I actually have the 7/05/2017 Raspbian GSC Lite image. I like the Lite image just because I'm not going to typically be using these with a graphical interface. So, and even though it's a light image, it's about 1.6 gig. So it's still a fairly large image. Now, to flash this using Windows, so using Linux, it's actually a pretty easy built-in command. However, using Windows, we need a program like this. This program is called Etcher, and it will actually write our image to our SD card. So it's perfect. It's really simple to use, as you can see. It has a nice kind of modern gray feel to it. So simple. We go and we're going to simply select our image. So I'm going to select the Raspbian GSC Lite image. We select our SD card, which it's already actually detected for me, and I know this because it's a 32 gig SD card. And you can see right here that it's showing 31.19, and I can simply click change if I want to do a different one. And when I'm done, I'm going to simply click flash. It's going to actually start copying everything over to the SD card. And you can see now that it's actually copying everything over to the SD card. And then once this is actually done and everything's copied, it's going to verify it. So I'm going to go ahead and just speed up the video right now so that you don't have to sit here and watch all this flash by. Now you see that I've gotten a success down here in the lower right and that the image was successfully written to my SD card. Excellent. Now there's one more thing I want to do. One thing at the end of this that it does is it actually unmounts the SD card, which is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to pop out my SD card, and I'm going to pop it right back in because I want it mounted at this point. And what you'll see is it's immediately going to ask me if I want to format it. I want to click cancel here. I do not. And it created two drives. It created a D drive and an E drive. Now the D drive is the one we're interested in. This is the boot drive. This is actually the boot folder within the Linux partition. So the one thing that I want to do And I want to do this because I don't have an external monitor keyboard that I want to actually set up for this. So I want to make sure that when my Raspberry Pi boots up for the first time, that SSH is enabled. I want to be able to actually SSH into the device. So all you need to do is create a file. It doesn't matter. The contents of the files are relevant. I can even show you this one if I open it, that the contents are line feeds. That's really the only content in this file. There's nothing to it. So all you need to do is just actually create this file. And then once you create this file, copy it to the boot drive. So in this case, the D drive. So now when I scroll down here, there's a file that's called the SSH. No path or no extension, nothing like that, just the file itself. And that's all we need. So now if I go ahead and close this, I can actually pull out the SD card, and then let's now show you what we need to do to set this up so that we can actually remote into it. So now that we have our image written to our SD card, we're going to simply put it into our Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to remove the micro SD card. I'm going to set my other SD card off to the side, and I'm going to take the Raspberry Pi, and on the back side here, there's a tiny little port. And that is where we're going to plug in our micro SD card. Now, we added that SSH file, and we added that SSH file so that when this guy boots up for the first time, or boots up anytime, SSH is automatically enabled. And that's what we need because we want to be able to remote into this guy without having to plug him up into an external monitor or mouse. Now, the key to that is it has to have network access. And the great thing is these ports, as with most network cards nowadays, are auto-sensing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, my laptop doesn't actually not have a network card. So I'm going to use a USB-C network adapter that I have. I'm going to plug that guy in here. That way I get me a network adapter. I'm going to take my network cable. I'm going to plug one end into my laptop. I'm going to plug the other end into the Raspberry Pi. So now I have an actual physical network connection between the Raspberry Pi and my laptop. The next thing I want to do is I want to get this prepared because I don't want to plug it in just yet, but it's a USB cable. I'm going to plug it into the USB port on my laptop, and I'm going to be prepared to plug it into the power port on the Raspberry Pi. But I need to do a couple things on my laptop first to have it ready for the Raspberry Pi when it boots up. So let's take a look at that. So you may recognize these two programs on my computer right now. You may recognize them. At the very least, you're more likely to recognize the one on the right, PuTTY. PuTTY is an application for doing SSH. It's a way that we can SSH into Linux boxes, into Cisco switches, or any other switch that'll do SSH. The great thing about PuTTY is it'll also allow you to do Telnet, RLogin, RAW, and as well as serial connection. So if you're connecting serially directly to a, say, Cisco device, this will facilitate that. We're going to use PuTTY in conjunction with this program, TFTPD64. And this is a very small program that you can download. It's a portable program. There's really no install for it. But this program can run as a DHCP server. And as we can see here, this is what we want. I'm going to go ahead and actually just delete this record because that's an old one I was using when I was testing. But what we have here is we have basically set up our DHCP server to hand out this information. It's going to start an IP pool with 192.168.2.5. The size of the pool is only 1 because we only need one IP address. And then we're giving it a default router only because we have to. We don't actually have a default router set up at this address, but we have to give it one in order for this program to work. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We've clicked OK. We just make sure that the server interfaces is set to there, and we let it roll. Now at this point, we can actually plug in our Raspberry Pi, and what we should see in a couple of seconds is a IP address pop up on this screen. And once that IP address pops up, we'll wait a few more seconds, and then we should actually be able to SSH directly into the Raspberry Pi. There we go. So now we can see that something has connected, something with the MAC address of B827 has connected to our DHCP server or has retrieved an address from our DHCP server here. Now, if you're not familiar with how DHCP servers work, let me know. I'll be happy to make another video kind of going over how DHCP servers work. But this is a very simple example. We basically just wanted to give this guy an IP address that we knew about. So now that he's done that and he's got an IP address, let's go ahead and see if we can, by typing that IP address in, connect to him. Excellent. Now this is just telling me that it's the host key does not match one that's in the PuTTY registry, which we fully expect. And now you can see that I'm actually at a login prompt for the Raspberry Pi. So we can confirm this is Raspberry Pi by using the default password for the Raspbian image, which is Pi and Raspberry. Excellent. So now you can see I am at the Raspberry Pi command line, and from here I can do whatever I want. I can connect it to a Wi-Fi network, I can start running some updates on it, I can install software, I can do whatever I need to do, and I never had to plug an external monitor or keyboard into this device. Now, one caveat is if you do something, which I have done many times, and you screw up the networking on this, as in you take the interface down or you restart the networking services and you have an error in your configuration, you will lock yourself out. And then at that point, you either need to reload the whole operating system on it, or you need to plug in an external keyboard and mouse in order to, keyboard and monitor in order to fix your configuration so that you can get back into it remotely. So I hope this has been a great informative video for you, and if you want more, please leave a like just so that I know, and follow me on Twitter at @TheSysAdminGuru, and always feel free to leave me a message or drop me an email and I'd be happy to answer it. Thanks. Talk to you later.